Good evening and welcome to Superintendent's Corner. My name is Richard Sapphire. I'm the Superintendent of Schools here in Gloucester. And this show is an opportunity to look at the issues, the programs, the successes, and the challenges that are part of the Gloucester Public School District. Perhaps more importantly, it gives us an opportunity to talk to the people that are responsible for attending to and addressing all those particular issues. Tonight we're going to take a look at the preschool, and we have with us the director of the Gloucester Preschool Program, Miss Anne Marie Jordan.
Hello.
Evening.
Good evening.
And welcome, and thank you for coming on board.
Thank you.
Great. Let's start off with a bit of some biography. Tell us about your background and how you came to be our director of the preschool.
Well, my original background in education was actually in health education, and when I started here in Gloucester in 1999, I was coordinated health education and emergency programming, worked with the physical education teachers, so it was more of an administrative role with the elementary, middle, and high schools here.
And I remember when I first came on board, there were sort of divisions of labor where you sort of had several hats, not the least of which are in addition to the preschool, you're responsible for kindergarten registration?
I am, which is actually a natural role as the preschool director. We work very cooperatively with a variety of preschool and early learning programs here in the community, so having contacts with Pathways for Children and some of the private preschool programs allows me to outreach effectively so that we can coordinate kindergarten registration kindergarten transition from preschool to kindergarten is really an important milestone for children as well as their families, and so being able to provide a good transition is really important.
Right, and so many of the students come either from our program or from Pathways as well.
They do.
That's almost the bulk of it, isn't it?
It's over half, definitely over half. So we.
Good. You are also one of the district's liaison to all of the emergency operations and safety across the city with police and fire and stuff. What's the title of that particular Cape Ann area network, do you recall?
The Cape Ann Emergency Planning Team. This is a group that was originally started through the Gloucester Health Department, and it coordinates emergency services through the Health Department. Addison Gilbert Hospital is very involved with it. Our neighboring communities, Essex, Rockport, Manchester, are all part of this process as well too. So it includes fire, police, emergency personnel, public health personnel, and schools are an important piece of this as well too.
For sure. In case of any emergencies, it needs to be coordinated as to how we're going to respond to them.
It does.
You have one more hat, and that is attending to any students who may be homeless as well.
That's correct.
Tell us a little bit about McKinney-Vento and your role as a homeless coordinator.
So McKinney-Vento is a federal law that requires school systems to ensure that when a family becomes homeless and they have children in a school system, that school is continuous and it isn't interrupted due to homelessness. And so the federal law requires us to make sure that we identify children who are homeless, and that can be in a variety of ways. It may be a family that has lost their housing and is living with friends or distant relatives, and so we call that doubling up and are staying with people. It may be inside of the community, it may be outside of the community. It may also be families that are placed in shelters or shelter type of placements, again, either in the community or outside of the community, and we ensure that their education isn't disrupted. So we may provide transportation to children if they're living outside of the community. We make sure that they are receiving meals, breakfast and lunch, and that they also have access to other outside programming. So if there's after-school programming or Title I services, we ensure that children are receiving those programs so that they're benefiting from the educational system.
Right. Sounds like a lot, and it's all inclusive. I don't know if you know this or not, but what is the history of the Gloucester Preschool? And then we can get into why it exists at all.
So the history of the preschool, and I asked a couple of people, I'm not sure how long it has been in existence. It had when it first started, there was a partnership with Pathways for Children, and the school district, because of our federal requirements through special education and in identifying and providing programs and services for children. We partnered with Pathways for Children to provide those programs and services within a classroom environment. And so hence the preschool program starting. So instead of children just coming to an individual school and receiving speech services or physical therapy or occupational therapy services, we provided them with an environment so that they could receive that within the least restrictive environment, which means that it's an inclusive environment. It's a typical preschool environment. We've, as you know, expanded quite a bit in the last several years. And so we have a number of classrooms that children who have disabilities are learning alongside children who are developing typically for their age.
Right. So then rather than sending services over to another agency, we now have the classrooms and the services all in one place, which is the Gloucester Preschool.
Correct.
So tell us a little bit about the configuration. You mentioned model students and just how is it configured?
Well, we have a number of, we call them integrated classrooms, which means there are 5 of those. And those are classrooms, it looks like a typical early childhood preschool classroom. And children who have an identified disability are learning along and playing alongside children who are developing typically for their age. And so with some modifications, some accommodations, some adaptations of curriculum, instruction, and so that children who do have identified disabilities are able to access a typical early childhood curriculum.
Right. And we also have some substantially separate classrooms as well.
So for children who aren't able to, who need some more individualized one-to-one direct teaching or instruction or services, we do have 2 smaller classrooms that allow for children with disabilities to be able to receive their programming and services within a small environment with a larger staff ratio in those.
Right.
Our ultimate goal is to work to have those children, as best as possible, integrated into a typical classroom, ideally before kindergarten if that's possible, or work to at least partially have them integrated before they reach kindergarten in the elementary schools. That's not always the case, but in most cases we are able to do that.
And the law requires certain class sizes for the integrated classrooms. The number is 15, but it needs to be divided a certain way?
Yes. So in order for it to be considered integrated, there can be up to 15 children, there can be no more than 7 of those children who have a disability and have an IEP or an individualized education plan in that classroom. So, and then up to 8 children who are developing typically for their age.
And you could, if necessary, add to the 15, but it could only be the children that are not students with disabilities.
Correct. Our primary goal is to assure that children who do have disabilities are able to learn a typical preschool curriculum. And the theory is if it's too large of a classroom, they aren't able to adequately receive those adaptations and accommodations within that environment. So.
And in the substantially separate programs, there's a ceiling as well.
Correct. So the law requires us to have no more than 8 children in that classroom. Typically in that classroom, there is a minimum of 1 lead teacher, and our teachers are master's level certified teachers. And then also in the integrated classrooms, we have 1 classroom assistant, and in the substantially separate classrooms, a minimum of 2 assistants in the classroom.
Now, the students with disabilities, they're very young, and the tendency is to identify them as developmentally delayed. There's an ease of sophistication in terms of diagnosis as children grow older. Is that an accurate thing to say?
For learning disabilities, absolutely. With a few exceptions, there are some disabilities that are diagnosed. So autism, a child on autism spectrum disorder may be diagnosed in our program. We may also have children with typical specific types of medical conditions or cognitive conditions. We may have a child who has Down syndrome in our program. So there are a few types of disability categories that are identified, but most of our children are identified as developmentally delayed,
Right.
Which means that they're delayed in all of the
That's
different.
my next question, by the way.
I anticipated.
Hey, thank you.
Some of the different areas of development. A large number of children who have speech or language delays. That's a very common delay in this age category. Speech is the mechanical aspect of how we talk. And language is our ability to understand and process communication. So we have a lot of children under our auspices who have speech and language delays. They may also have gross motor delays, the ability to catch and throw balls, fine motor delays where they have a hard time picking things up or being able to write or draw things. And we work on those types of delays. We may also have children who have social and emotional learning delays. So that's not necessarily, it's not an emotional problem, but it may be a social emotional delay. So having a hard time playing well in the sandbox,
Right.
as they say.
Yes.
Most children, by the time they reach preschool age, go from what's called parallel play. Little toddlers don't play with each other; they may play beside each other.
Right.
But then they're starting to learn how to interact and play with each other. That is an example of a social emotional learning delay. They're having a hard time being able to play and interact with other children.
Right. Great. So we provide physical therapy, occupational therapy. Some people may not know the difference between the two.
Physical therapy are kind of those gross muscle activities. So jumping up and down,
Right.
being able to walk on a balance beam, being able to throw a ball. Occupational therapy is working with those fine motor skills.
Right.
The ability to be able to pick up and use a pencil,
Right.
being able to play with Play-Doh and manipulate that. So those types of delays.
Right. And the facilities that we have encompass and allow for separate spaces for physical therapy and for speech and language. We have adjustment counselors and social workers and the like, psychologists.
Correct.
These children are young, but they have the same needs and requirements of students that are older, and we're there to provide those particular services.
Correct. A lot of the services they provide are in the classroom because an ideal environment is their preschool classroom environment. For some services, they will be pulled out, and they're either in the occupational therapy room, speech and language room, or we, as you know, we call it the motor room,
Right.
and our physical therapist works with children. We have balance beams and mats and wedges and swings and all of those fun things.
I'm usually in there after hours, by the
Yeah.
way, just so I can work off some of the day's stresses and strains. So let's talk a little bit about the types of curriculum that are in the preschool. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So a lot of what we do, and it is curriculum, is based in play. So a lot of what children are learning, whether it's around the developmental foundations or whether it's around academics, is usually within the context of play. So most of our curriculum is teacher-driven. Our teachers work in teams and develop curriculum around a variety. Usually it's themes. In the fall, we do lots of things around apples and leaves and things that are going on in the environment. We hit the holidays at springtime. As you know, we have 5 school gardens, and we do lots of planting.
Right.
And learning occurs, the curriculum is around those activities, but out of that we pull the different developmental skills as well as academic skills that we want them to learn
Right.
through that. We do have a couple of packaged curricula that we use. One of those is a social emotional learning curriculum. It's called Second Step. It's a program that's also used in our elementary schools. It teaches and helps children develop social emotional learning skills, understanding and identifying emotions, problem solving, how to wait turn for things. Those are all developmental skills throughout the early years into elementary school. They're really important foundational skills. We also use Lively Letters, which is a early letter identification phonics program that's also used in our kindergartens and first grade. It's also fun because learning should be fun.
Absolutely.
But it is a more structured program that teaches children about letter identification and phonics and letter sounds and those types of things.
Good. Two things. You were talking about the different things for the different seasons. We have a supply room that is filled up and then some, because I know that the preschool teachers are bringing out materials for the fall and then packing that away and bringing out stuff for winter, and the same holds for spring as well. And there's a massive move and transfer of the materials and supplies in order to connect the work that's being done with the seasons, with the time of the year, and things that the children experience in their lives. You also spoke about learning being fun. I may have mentioned this book previously on the show, but Tony Wagner is a Harvard researcher who has written extensively about creating the educational environment to encourage innovation, creativity, and all the rest. And his mantra is that beginning with play ultimately becomes passion, which then can become purpose. And I don't think there's an age limit on that. I mean, we've all watched children, and we've all said to ourselves, look how excited they seem to be at doing this. And in the back of your mind, you don't want to say it, but you wonder if that's something that's going to become not only play, but perhaps a passion, and then ultimately a purpose. It's one of the reasons we give them music lessons and every other lesson under the sun.
Absolutely,
is to give them those opportunities to identify that. And it sounds as though the preschool is predicated on that as well. What are the hours for the preschool? And I know that children come for different times. Some stay longer, some stay shorter. Can you describe that for us?
We have a very busy building. So our full program is in session from 8:30 to 2:30. Children are there Monday through Thursday. Within that 8:30 to 2:30 schedule, there are some children that are there for just a morning session or an afternoon session. Morning sessions run from 8:30 to 11. The afternoon sessions run from 12 to 2:30. We do have a couple of full-day classrooms as well for a variety of reasons, and they will run the full 8:30 to 2:30. In addition, a few years ago, we introduced an optional lunch bunch program for families that like a little more extended time beyond the 8:30 to 11 or 12 to 2:30. We offer a lunch bunch from 11 to 12 as well for some children. That's a small program, but
right. Is that more for convenience for parents and their schedules, or is it more directed at helping children to grow and mature and socialize?
I think it's a little of both. I think it did come out of the idea of helping parents extend their children's day. If they have a hard time picking a child up at 11, but they can delay it until 12, that works well. But we do set it up. It is not as structured as one of our classrooms, but if you go into Lunch Bunch, you see children playing in different centers. We have manipulatives, creative activities, there's make-believe. So a lot of the same types of activities that we have in the classroom happen in the Lunch Bunch, but in a less structured format. Even eating together is a learning experience.
For sure. Sometimes more so than others. Speak a little bit to the facilities we have for recreation. These are kids, after all.
So we do have, our classrooms are set up in a way so children can, we're not like some of the other schools. They are able to, if you go into a classroom, you see lots of different areas. There's a circle area, there are a variety of play areas broken down into art area, make-believe area. We have libraries, writing areas, manipulative play, Play-Doh is a great activity for children. Manipulatives, the other manipulatives can include magnetic blocks, Legos, those types of things.
Yeah.
And then for outdoor play, we have a fenced-in playground area where children can go out. They go out every day to play and be able to enjoy the outside. And then we also, for those times when the weather is not cooperative, we also do have an indoor play area. We call it the multi-purpose room. That we have bicycles and balls and a variety of things so children can have that unstructured playtime.
Right, and perhaps one of us should mention that we're well aware of the Department of Education's early education and child care requirements, and that our building and our facilities and our recreational areas and everything else are fully compliant with the expectations for what preschools should be all about, should be stated. Earlier on, we talked a little bit about the curriculum, the seasons, the associations. There are a lot of activities that highlight the school year as well. Planting Day, Stone Soup, Fire Safety Day, Curious Creatures, Holiday Sing-Along. Tell us a little bit about some of those. Let's start with Planting Day.
So Planting Day is and we do have a Planting Day, but we now have 2 planting days. We do planting in the spring, and we also do planting in the fall. And those are times when we work collaboratively with the Backyard Growers Program here in Gloucester, and they do a wonderful job of coming in, teaching children how to plant seeds, talking about what the process is, asking great hypothetical questions about what they think will happen once we plant these seeds. How long will it take one seed to grow as opposed to another? What do we have to do to ensure that they grow? So we do have those planting days. We also connect it to, you talked about, I think you mentioned Stone Soup.
I did.
We do try to connect these activities. So lots of community groups that we work with, in addition to, instead of it just being a one-shot activity, we really try to make a connection to a larger curriculum. So Planting Day also turns into Harvest Day, and we may have some taste tests so that children can try the things that they've grown. In the fall, we still have a few things out there where they're going to be picking those at some point, and we will have
basil, by the way.
I think it's all cut down.
Oh, it's too bad.
I stole a little bit
I wanted
myself.
to make a sauce this week.
There was a lot of good basil, better than mine.
Yeah.
So we will harvest some of the fall vegetables, tie it to our Stone Soup activity. Stone Soup is a lovely children's book, talks about family connections, friendships. We will make soup in the preschool. They will cut up their vegetables and they will add all of the ingredients. Families will contribute to the soup making process, and then we will have a culminating morning and afternoon where families come in, we read the story, and we share the soup. Right. So we connect all of those together for a larger, more enriching curriculum activity.
Terrific. And we have to mention, because I've seen it, Fire Safety Day.
Oh,
it's
we
got to
love
be one of the big
Firefighter
ones.
Dom. He comes every year. Children love it, and he brings a story. The premise of what he has a couple of premises in his intent in coming. It is to be able to teach children, even at our age, some basic safety skills about dialing 911, to be able to drop and crawl or roll.
Should there be smoke?
Should there be smoke? And then also an important piece to teach to children not to be afraid of people in uniform. So he brings the fire truck, as you know.
Yes.
Which is fun, but it also teaches a good lesson that if there is ever an emergency situation, if they see people, it might be a scary situation, but all those people behind the hoods and the hats and the equipment are there to help them. So we all go, after he reads the story and he teaches them a few pointers about safety, then we go out and they get to look at the fire truck and see him dressed up in his firefighting equipment.
Full regalia,
yes,
as they say.
and they love it.
Oh, I'm sure. I have a grandson who, every other day, it seems I get a photograph of him in some fire truck, either in Medford or happened in Gloucester the other day as well. So he seems to really love it. And Curious Creatures, I think we know what that is.
We do. So Curious Creatures is a lovely program in the North Shore area. They bring variety of animals down and allows children to come in and see some of them, learn about their habitat, learn about their the different animals and how they eat and what they look like, what types of environments they live in, and they get to touch them, which is kind of cool. I like that too.
Yeah.
So reptiles and furry animals, there's a few snakes that come sometimes, a crocodile or an alligator, I can't remember.
With some duct tape, I hope.
Yes.
Good. Perhaps the last topic we'll touch upon is a little bit about the arts program
Yes.
in the preschool.
We have a lovely collaboration with Cape Ann Museum. They do come into our program several times over the year to work with our children, and their arts educator will do lessons around arts and what the arts mean, a variety of mediums, painting, sculpture. They also, the arts educator will also talk about Gloucester and Cape Ann artists, so tie in some of those very important pieces as well. And then they get to do their art projects. And in fact, we've had a number of art projects in the Arts Festival, which is every spring down.
Right, in May, around May 13th-ish, usually is when it takes
and
place.
that's a lovely also family connection. It allows us to have families come and go downtown and see some of their children's artwork, and it's a great connection.
Great. The last thing I will ask, we have about a minute and 50 seconds or so, is what is talk a little bit about the screening process for incoming students, because that's something that parents each year will perhaps is one of the first experiences they're going to have in preparing to have their children go to preschool.
So we have, because we are a special education program, the screening process, there is not a screening process per se for children who are suspected to have a disability. We will receive requests from families to evaluate their children. They have areas of concern. They may have an area of concern, a physician, a preschool program they may be in, and so they would like to have their child evaluated. So there is a full process that we go through in order to evaluate children for services. Our program is for 3-year-olds and to 5-year-olds before kindergarten, and so we will evaluate children who are suspected of having a disability throughout the year, depending on when they turn 3. We also have children who are developing. Typically, families may be interested in our program. Generally, we try to encourage families. Our program runs from September through June, so we try to identify children early in the year, in the winter and the early spring. We have a number of screening days where parents can come, sign up, and we screen them in a variety of developmental areas. So their gross motor skills, fine motor skills, speech and language, and cognition, to make sure that they're on track and in the developmental domains where they should be.
Right.
If for some reason we have a concern, we may recommend for a family to have their child evaluated in the area where we think that they might be there might be a delay.
Yeah. Terrific. Well, we have and thanks to you and the folks that work with you, we have a very robust, comprehensive preschool program. And I don't mind adding the fact that only 3 years ago we had about 75 students, and now we have in excess of over 100 students.
We do.
And I think that speaks largely to the quality of the program, the people that are responsible for it. So thank you, and thank your staff as well.
It's great fun.
And that's it for tonight for Superintendent's Corner. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.